Sam, we were just talking before you came on here about the text messages that got reported from KETV regarding the Trev Albert situation. Do you think we learned anything from those interactions, or I suppose lack of interactions between Trev and Governor Pillen and some of the regions?
I think what we learned from those is probably what we already knew, which was that Nebraska did not want to lose Trev Albert. That there was a sense of wanting to keep him around. Figuring out, hey, let's figure this problem out. Obviously, presidential search was part of that, based on the text message, I think, from Tim Clare. I think there was a little bit there. In my conversation with Trev, I think I have a pretty good sense of the entire issue. And so, I don't know that I learned a lot. And I think that the presidential issue is only part of it. It's not the entirety of it. And, and I think there's,
agreed.
There was an opportunity, I think, again, all of Trev's kids are out of high school. You usually make one move after that happens. This is that move. There's issues that Nebraska is going to have to navigate over the next 5 to 7 years that are not necessarily things that he could control or any AD can control, related to the AU and related to other campuses.
Can we say that part out loud? Because for a month or two, and then years after Perlman left, we kind of poo-pooed the AAU, and we said this 3 weeks ago, Sam. I said, you never want to be the only one that's not doing something. And people are like, I don't buy that one bit, and this, that, and the other. Sounds like that status that designation was going to be pretty important.
It's important, especially when the football team hasn't been to a bowl game in 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, if the football team was playing like Clemson has been for the last 8 years, and Clemson obviously isn't in the Big Ten.
Or Oregon, who's equally as dicey.
Yeah.
You've seen. I brought that up a couple. I'm like, has anybody paid attention to Oregon? Like, how are they keeping their designation?
Right, but they play football.
Yep.
And,
I get it. I get it.
Those Phil Knight checks keep
so that's
clearing.
The other thing is, the Big Ten, Nebraska football, even though it's still a good brand, and does draw pretty well, it hasn't been great, and it hasn't really even been good. And so, the need to get Nebraska back to where it needs to be, or where it wants to be in Big Ten football is urgent, very, very urgent. And that's that's the other component here. You don't have AAU membership, but your football team's not very good.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and a lot of people, again, as we cover the program, we don't necessarily think about all the other dynamics. We're so busy, pumping up the next roster to be the best of all time, and this to be the best culture of all time, and then they win 4 or 5 games and nobody understands why. The reality is you got to be good relative to your peers. And I think there's been seasons where Nebraska football, like 2021, was probably a pretty darn good football team in a different league, but in the league that they're in, they were 3-9. And so you've got to figure out a way to get your team relative to the peers that are around you to be better than the record that they've had. And that's the challenge that Matt Rule has ahead.
We're talking with Sam McKewon of the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, as you at least last thing from me here on Trev, as you kind of look at the landscape that Nebraska has moving forward, obviously just shortly after Trev leaves, you got a priority candidate for president in place. You've got a new AD in place as well, who we heard from last week. Is there an argument to be made that Nebraska is maybe better positioned moving forward than they were before Trev left?
Well, I mean, I think in some ways they could be, yes. That there's, I think you're going to have a very motivated athletic director, very motivated, to do whatever needs to be done to take care of, to help the football program and to remove any obstacles that might be there. So I think he's going to be a motivated guy. Sure. and that helps, I think, in some ways. And, depending on how you see that football stadium project, whether, that gets the full green light or, they reduce the project or whatever, whatever you want to see them do. I think Dan is going to, again, I think he's going to be really, really motivated, and not because it's his alma mater, because it's not. I think he's going to be really, really motivated to help Nebraska and to make his own mark. This is a destination job, and I think he knows that, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, I think some of it is not in his hands; it's in the football coach's hands, and more to the point, it's in the quarterback's hands. And so there's a lot there that's really interesting. It puts a lot of pressure on number 15 and to be everything that everybody hopes he is, because I think there's still question marks about whether the team that surrounds the quarterback at Nebraska is going to be good enough. And so we'll see. I mean, it's an interesting spring camp in that way, and that's kind of how we're gauging it. It's been 25 years since Nebraska's won a conference championship. It's the 25th year anniversary of the 1999 team. Pretty interesting.
Let me ask you something here, Sam. Can we have do you think we're ready, or can have, or not even will we have to have the conversation that if the quarterback battle is a battle, or it's prolonged, or the coaches don't say what we want to hear, to have any Dylan success like validated or spoken out loud, like, hey, he's great? Are we capable of even handling that? Because what if other people have just gotten better, right? Because that's a thing, right?
Right. You're talking about Heinrich getting better?
It could be Heinrich, it could be DK. I do feel like if it's Harburg, then we're gonna be like, oh geez, man, Dylan isn't very good. But a couple of things can be true at once, because what we don't know is emotional temperament.
Right. Yeah. I don't, for no period of time do I discount the possibility that Daniel Kalen can be a very good quarterback here. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was an Elite 11 quarterback. Didn't necessarily have the best senior year, but as you've explained before, he was kind of running around a lot because he didn't have a ton of protection. And historically, Nebraska pundits, not you, but they like to they like to rip on their own. Mm-hmm. I've never quite understood that. I think that's more of a trend in the last 10 to 12 years.
100%.
Football and basketball. Like, yeah, these kids aren't very good.
Yep. It's almost like we know too much, right? It's like the quarterback or people working their way up to the draft. The more we see them, the more we pick at them. Other people like them, right?
Yeah. It's know too much and desire to be too. And this is, again, not you. Desire to be too big a part of the success story. They weren't very good, but fortunately they knew me, that kind of thing.
Oh, 100%.
So that kind of stuff, handlers and whatnot, just like strange.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So I think there's some of that, but I think Daniel can be very, can potentially be very good. Obviously, they didn't give him the Elite 11 designation because he was going to Nebraska. I mean, that's for sure. I didn't, that's not why they gave it to him. They never given it to anybody else. So he did a good job out there. And now people are tough on Dylan. There's just a lot of pressure on Dylan, and I don't know that he feels it.
Do you know why? Do you know why I really asked the question? Because this is the coach in me. This isn't like saying a guy is better than another guy or not, right? I've been through a ton of springs. I know Nebraska's quarterback situation, and this is my coach's hat. What you could see happen is, without guys being really taken to the ground, some of the intricate blitz packages where they can get after a guy and bury him or put pressure on him. All these quarterbacks have some skill sets where they could shine, right? Mm-hmm. So if there's no real fear of like getting knocked on your ass or hurt, or guys turn loose over an extended period of time. You may have some live periods, but if you're not doing that to your quarterback all the time, you can kind of get a false sense of security about what a quarterback's about, because that's why you really never know until they actually play a game. So what if Nebraska so why I say all this to say, Nebraska feels like they may have been burned with Sims, right? Like, he looks like this during this, or any other quarterback. It doesn't just have to be Sims. But hey, when they start getting hit and you got to snap the ball for the 15th time, you don't feel like, maybe that's why they could slow play it too.
Yeah, that's a great point.
You know what I mean?
For sure, I do. I don't think fans would I think people would be like, well, if Rayola is good and Kalen's good, well, yeah, all the better. I don't think people would necessarily hesitate at that, because again, once Rayola committed, it was like, well, I don't know. I mean, Daniel Kalen can come along too, but he was a pretty highly touted quarterback, going into whatever. And so, I think there was. I just know that there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on the quarterback position. And I'm also going on what the track record, and this is something that I do think that Rule can fix, but simultaneously, has to fix, is that the rest of the offense has to be good.
Yep.
Too consistently, Adrian Martinez, got a lot of crap for, and I know he's not, but he's still playing in the USFL. He is not terrible. And he got a lot of.
He was fortunate with that knee. I hope. Yeah, it's good to see him come back. To the game the other day.
It was he got a lot of heat for stuff that ultimately wasn't entirely in his control. If you put that quarterback, one of these quarterbacks is going to get picked in the first round of the NFL draft here in a month or 24 days or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
One of these quarterbacks is going to be picked in the first round. It's not going to be very good, and we're going to realize, oh wow, they were surrounded by an all-star team.
Yeah, we always say
we're going to learn that. I don't know which one it is. I have a hunch of who it's going to be, but it's probably not going to be Caleb Williams or Jaden Daniels. But is Bo Nix really that good? We're going to find out, because he was surrounded by an all-star team. Is JJ McCarthy? Jim Harbaugh is loves JJ McCarthy, but could any of quarterback have won 12 games? It's very possible that a lot of.
Cade McNamara did.
Won 12 games. Right. So, there's just some things that Nebraska's got to get better at that it has not consistently been good at, and that's the responsibility of the coaches that they have on hand and the offensive coordinator calling the play. And so, we'll see how it goes. Not one person that I've talked to has any question about the defense. That's what's notable. The defense is going to be good. Everybody trusts that. That's the culture. The question is, can the offense be good? And they're going to need the offense to be good in order to win the number of games they want to win. Iowa's the only team that has cracked that code of having horrible offense and playing, still winning games. It's unlikely that two teams will be able to pull that off. And so Nebraska's got to get better at scoring points, and we'll see if they can do it.
We're talking with Sam McKewon of the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, obviously the quarterback position gets a ton of eyeballs. I know a lot of people will be looking at wide receivers and running back as well. Is there a position on the offensive side that you mentioned is so critical that you feel good about? Because the answer I've heard so far this spring would have been the very last answer we heard last spring.
I think the offensive line can get better. Yeah. I think there's some nice options in the interior. They seem to have some depth there. It's offensive line play is not something I fully understand, and I think it's hard to understand because it's dependent on the scheme, and it's dependent on the people behind you and on a bunch of other things. And so, I do think it's a decent line. It appears to be healthy for the most part. And, Ben Scott's healthy, and Bryce Benhart's healthy, and Prohaska's healthy. So, that seems like it's going to be a decent unit. I do think the wide receivers can be better, and it does appear that they got two transfers who have some size on them. We'll see with the running backs. I think that's the one where, you're watching and wondering if they've got the they've got the right guy. I think of Michigan State and how they changed in the 1 year they got Kenneth Walker, and he was he's a good player in the pros too, because he could make guys miss, and you couldn't. The first guy didn't tackle him, and then Michigan State was able to win some games in part because they had a running back who could make guys miss, and so I think Nebraska could use one of those guys. We'll see. I think a lot of people that have been covering the program for a long time are kind of in prove it mode. It's hey, we'll sit back and wait. And the defense proved something last year. The offense was the worst offense they've had in 50 years. Again, people don't like saying that because it seems like a rude thing to say, but it's the worst. And so, and yeah, relative to the Big Ten's a great defensive league, but it was a bad offense. So, what do you do? It's got to get better.
You guys are just listening real time. I go back to the quarterback thing with the offensive line and wide receivers. I wonder if some of that decision, because you talked about, Sam, guys needing to be better around, the team has to develop and all those things that are true. I wonder if you take a look at that quarterback spot and you say, okay, who needs the fewest things to go right, or who can do the most with the least? Well, is that the same person? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I would assume that if all things being equal and everybody's healthy,
who needs the most things to go right to function, who can operate in chaos? Is that the same quarterback?
Right. I think again, it kind of depends on what you're looking for from a quarterback.
Because that might be a thing, right?
It could be a different thing in 3 years too. It depends on. But I think Dylan is the leader in the clubhouse on both accounts. Although, I don't know how much Harvard has progressed. They're not going to show us practice, or they're not going to show us that much. And it's a pretty tightly lipped culture, and so we're not going to know a lot. Then we'll get in the spring game and we'll see how it goes. And we all thought coming out of the spring game last year, oh, that Jeff Sims looks pretty good. And then you get into the season, and whatever happened to him happened. Like, he just didn't seem like the same player, and things went downhill. So
we're pretty fickle with that, though, because remember when Casey only threw like 4 passes and everybody's like, I don't get it. And then like the season went on, and it's like, oh gosh, we need that guy. You know what I mean? So it's like, what are the takeaways at the quarterback spot?
For sure. Yeah. It'll always be a question of, how much could Casey have helped last year's team? And
I'm not misremembering though, right? We don't know how to take spring quarterback play.
No.
But we are definitely
he threw one out pass. I don't. What's all the fuss about? And I was just like,
I know. Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, Nebraska just decided, hey, we think Justin's going to be better than Casey Thompson. And they were right about Casey getting hurt. I mean, he gets hurt, so he got hurt at Florida Atlantic, unfortunately. But there's no, between the two quarterbacks being healthy, there's any question which one would have been better. And that's a mistake that, again, like, I think Nebraska's owned that, and I think they've moved on from it. They've tried to do it in a way that, that doesn't overplay the miscalculation. But we were writing about the offense after the second game, and like, this is a problem, and the turnovers are a problem. They didn't get much better. So, that's something they're going to have to figure out, like, right now. And it seems maybe a little rude. Like, most of the stories that are coming out are about, how great everything is over there. But I don't think Nebraska's football staff feels that way. I think they feel the urgency, and they want to get a heck of a lot better in a very short amount of time. And they're working really hard to do that.
Sam, got about a minute and a half here with you. Isn't that kind of always part of the challenge with Nebraska, though, is weighing the optimism that is oftentimes, especially this part of the year, felt by the state versus the urgency that's actually necessary to reach that level?
Yes. I think maybe the difference this time is that I think the coach in charge is sincere in his urgency and desire to get better in a short amount of time. And I also think now, because of just a few things that have been said, everybody's starting to look around and say, okay, got to get better now, because the bigger Big Ten is going to make this hard. We cannot afford to, to wait around any longer. Got to make a mark, and got to case. And so I think there's a sense of urgency now that just didn't exist during the Frost year. And honestly, it burned Frost. Like he just didn't ever turn the corner on stuff. But I think Rule will turn the corner, and then it comes down to how well the players play, because Rule can only do so much. He can't play the football game. So we'll see.
That's Sam McKewon from the Omaha World-Herald. Sam, we appreciate your time as always. We will talk to you next week.
Take care.
Thanks, Sam.